Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast where, if you thought the girls were petty and cruel, wait till you get a load of the guys. Book number 47, Troublemaker.
Has Julie Porter fallen for the wrong guy?
So does that make me Miss America?
Hello, welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, gladiators, and welcome to our guest, Marissa Wasseluk-Stuart. I didn't ask you again. Is that right? Did I
No,
put the
that's
emphasis
perfect.
in the right place?
You say it so much better than anyone else.
Well, but in the last time you were on...
started hyphenating my name to, make my husband feel like we're a family.
Well, the last time you were on, I was the first time I had ever said your last name out loud, ever. So I said it, I put the emphasis in the wrong place. And so I had to, it was a real mind-blowing moment for me because I'm usually pretty good at that kind of thing. But in this case...
every time, it's always funny, like whenever you read something and then someone says the word out loud and you're like, I never knew that was actually the word. It happens to me a lot because I don't have a lot of friends with a lot of good vocabulary and
well, no, you're so right though. Readers, I think, or like avid readers can be very prone to mispronouncing words because I think that we see words a lot and so it becomes a part of your vocabulary, but if you heard it in your head wrong, then it's wrong. Do you have any of those out of curiosity that you remember from like when you were growing up that you thought was something else?
I wish I had one off the top of my head. It happens to my husband a lot because he's an avid reader and he'll say something, and he always reads things in context, and he'll say something and I'll be like, actually, you mean that? And I'll like mansplain to him that he's got the wrong word.
Ooh, you're allowed to do that. The only one I can remember from growing up is the word voila, which as a kid, I mean, it's a French word. How are you supposed to know? But I definitely always thought it was essentially like viola because it's only one letter off. But
yeah, actually, now that you say it, it's those foreign words like hors d'oeuvres. For the longest time when I was a kid, whore's divorce, like
whore's divorce. Yeah, those words come up in these Sweet Valley books too because they're so obsessed with French.
Yeah,
and this book has a lot of ballet terms. So unless you just know from taking ballet classes, which many young kids in America, especially young girls, would, but they talk about relevés and arabesques and grand jetés. But it's not a ballet book.
No,
this book is about Julie Porter. So, Marissa, would you care to remind the gladiators what you were here to talk about on your last episode?
Well, last time I got to speak with you about these wonderful books, we were reading, I forget the number that we were reading, but it was about, I do have it.
It's got to be 30-something, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that long ago.
I'm flipping through my Kindle for the last, but I've downloaded so much manga since then, so it's going to be a lot of...
Ooh. Awesome. Well, perhaps some listeners would be more interested in hearing about that. I think it was number 36.
It was 36.
Does that sound right?
Last Chance with, where we explored actually... the feelings of Joanna Porter, Julie's older sister, who had recently come back to high school after, trying to make it out on her own and feeling not a part of the high school community because, she was coming back to school and it seemed like nobody even wanted her there and she was going through a lot of hurt. But,
her mother had died. Their mother had died.
Yes. And she did eventually find some solace in being with her musically inclined family. We do see Joanna in the first chapter of this book, Troublemakers, as she...
Yeah, it's just like a little reminder. Remember Joanna Porter? She's still good at computers.
She's still doing that women in STEM thing. So she this book focuses on her little sister, Julie, who is a musical prodigy, and is actually helping Elizabeth with her dreams of becoming apparently a recorder, a master of the recorder.
Sorry, I couldn't keep my laugh in. It's just so funny to me. I mean, I've been thinking about it a lot, just because the recorder is such a funny instrument, but they really class it up. Somehow Elizabeth has gone from Jessica's plastic recorder that she had in the last book to having a wooden recorder, apparently, in this book. But I was thinking that the recorder, maybe they just thought it was a believable instrument that you could make a lot of progress on quickly more than something else. I'm not sure. But yeah, they've done a pretty good job, I think, of planting Julie in the last several books as a musical prodigy, a musical character. And I kind of think that the whole purpose of this recorder subplot which came up in the previous book was actually just a plant to get Elizabeth and Julie closer. Actually, I have a perfect passage to read about this because it tickled me a little bit because I felt like the book was being so transparent. Let's see. It's right on page 9, like right at the beginning of the book. We're describing Julie here. All her life, she had been labeled the shy, sensitive type. It wasn't that she didn't like other kids, she just didn't feel comfortable hanging out in big groups. There were always one or two close friends in her life, preferably ones who shared her love of music, such as Elizabeth Wakefield, her newest friend. Actually, Elizabeth and Julie had known each other for years. They had been very good friends back in Sweet Valley Middle School, but they had started hanging out with different crowds when they reached high school, and it was only in the last few weeks that they had grown close again. Julie was finally starting to feel she could really talk to Elizabeth about whatever was on her mind. So that's a little bit of backstory that I feel like the book just made up. Yeah. Even the actually is like, actually, they were friends before. That's not the first time in this book that we're in Julie's head and the writer says, actually, never mind.
I do appreciate the nuggets that Ms. Pascal puts in all of these books. Like, because when she says, actually, they were friends in middle school, that makes me want to find the Julie Porter book in Sweet Valley Twins, that like where she might have come up in middle school. It makes me want to like flip back, and every time, and there are times here where, even later on in the book, she starts talking about Bruce and how he's changed since his last girlfriend and that sort of thing. And it made me want to go back and actually listen to the podcast where Bruce and Regina finally go out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We skipped over the part of the podcast where we talk about the cover, but let's I think this is actually such a natural segue that we'll just have to remember to come back. Help me remember to come back to the cover because this is perfect. So at the beginning of the book, Julie and Elizabeth have been practicing the recorder duet together. They leave the practice room and they overhear like a noise in a locker, and Bruce, Winston Egbert, and Ronnie Edwards, who are like hanging out together and like laughing about something, and they realize that they have stuffed a kid in a locker. And the locker opens, and the kid is this guy, Josh Bowen, who's a good friend of Julie's, who is, he's not a little kid. He's another junior. He's as big as Bruce, apparently. And he is pledging the, what is it, Phi Delta Epsilon?
Yes. They refer to them as Phi Epsilons throughout the book, so I don't quite remember the name.
If there's a delta in there or not. Yeah. I might be thinking of something else, but Phi Epsilon, the fraternity, because of course Sweet Valley High has a fraternity to go along with their sorority.
Right.
So the reason I put in all that backstory, and I will stop talking in a second, Marissa, and let you chime in, is because you mention how Bruce has been going through something, he changed because of Regina. And that's something that definitely comes up a few times in the book, including in this moment where they're it's right at the beginning of the book, and Julie and Elizabeth are talking about why a nice guy like Josh Bowen might want to pledge this fraternity. Elizabeth says, that fraternity has really changed. I mean, it used to be that pledging was fun, not mean. Really? How do you know that? Well, my old boyfriend Todd Wilkins was a member. Elizabeth laughed and quickly added, but believe me, he never went around torturing people. I think that must have started happening when Bruce became one of the ringleaders. He certainly wasn't very nice to Josh just now. Julie shrugged her shoulders. Well, I don't know. I feel sort of bad for Bruce. You know, because of Regina and all. Julie didn't really know Bruce, but she had seen him at school with Regina, and it was easy to tell that they had been in love. And she knew he must have been devastated by Regina's sudden death, caused by a rare reaction to cocaine the one time she had tried it at a party. Julie looked at the ground. I know what it's like when someone you love dies, she added softly. Elizabeth nodded. He seemed so happy when he was going with her. It was as if his whole personality changed. She sighed. It's just so strange to see him acting like his old self again. We've got our Bruce back. The old Bruce.
Well, see, like, I found myself questioning whether or not he was really putting on a show because he felt like he had to be that old Bruce, you know. Actually, I felt, and I know that I was disappointed as we moved through the book that we do have that old Bruce back again, but there was a point, and I'm trying to find it now. Okay, so can we skip over to, I'm on page 693. What chapter is this?
Right, in the Kindle version. There's many more pages than in the paper version.
Yeah, I get 2 paragraphs per page.
Well, what you're getting at, I think, is that Josh, through the course of the book, this kid Josh Bowen, who is Julie Porter's friend and neighbor, and he was mentioned in the previous book in passing, but he's pretty new. New to the books. He's not new to the school or anything. He goes through a lot of stuff in the book that kind of, it makes him question whether it's worth it. Like, he really wants to be in this fraternity because his brother was in it, who's graduated now, and thought it was really important and special. But there's a lot of stuff that he's put through in the pledge process that makes him consider whether it's really worth it. And the book has to kind of do some work to get him to stick with it, to justify him sticking with it. So I think it's John Pfeiffer at some point who talks to him. Did you find the part
yes,
that
I
you're
did.
looking for?
Yes. Do you mind if I read this out loud here?
Please.
All right.
Please do.
So, Josh has just been, again, just embarrassed by Bruce. I do believe he was getting ready for the big Phi Epsilon party. And
right, which is like the centerpiece of this book, this party. Everybody is talking about it. And it happens like halfway through. Like, it's important.
In fact, at the very beginning of the book, Elizabeth has to reschedule her practice times with Julie Porter because she's going to the party on Friday, and she forgot that she was going to the big party on Friday with her new boyfriend. So from the very beginning, everyone's looking forward to the Phi Epsilon party. And here we are in the middle of the book where Josh, Julie's friend, and now just one of the Elizabeth's crew, is getting ready for this big Phi Epsilon party at Bruce's house. Bruce is making all of the pledges do random, embarrassing things that Josh really feels are very demeaning, and he storms out of the party. And he's stopped by John Pfeiffer, who is also a brother, and hasn't been pushing people around. He just says, it's just part of the pledge process, and you'll get to do it. Don't even worry about it. So Josh runs out of the house, and John Pfeiffer calls out, "Hey, Bowen, wait!" Josh pretended to ignore John, but John came right up and leaned into the window. "Listen, Josh," he said, "don't let Bruce get to you. Sometimes he gets a little crazy, but he doesn't mean half the things he says." He smiled. "Just remember, we're not all like that." "I don't know, John," Josh answered. "What's it going to be like if I do join and Bruce and I have to hang out together?" "I'll let you in on a little secret. Bruce would kill me if he knew I was telling you this." John took a deep breath. "Now I know Bruce pretty well. He doesn't really talk much. I mean, talk about what's going on inside him. But he said something the other day I couldn't forget. He said he'd let himself get too soft, too vulnerable when he was going out with Regina. Somehow he thinks if he'd been tougher, he wouldn't be hurting so much. But that's ridiculous, I know. You've got to understand that he's in bad shape. And when he sees you, well, I think you remind him of the nice guy he became around Regina. I have a feeling he's trying to, toughen you up or something. I guess by being hard on you, in a way, he's being hard on himself. Now, I read that and I'm like, okay, all right. I'll give Bruce the benefit of the doubt. He's hurting inside and he's projecting. So maybe we don't see, maybe this isn't the old Bruce that we knew before Regina. Maybe this is Bruce coping with his grief. So I actually took that journey with Josh and Julie with can we trust Bruce?
I heard you reading it this time, I mean, I just read this book this morning, but when I heard you reading John's excuses this time, it had a very big, hashtag not all Phi Eps energy. No, it'll be fine. And there is, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about this and maybe we should, but it's amazing to think about what people are going through and to, it's good to humanize him, but it's also such a big excuse because, I mean, over the course of this book, Bruce is the ringleader of all of these different hazing things. And I mean, let's talk about what they are. There's the locker thing at the beginning. Mm-hmm. That's nothing.
Yeah.
We quickly thereafter are at Casey's with Julie, Josh, and Elizabeth are together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've all so Julie, Josh, and Elizabeth are all finishing their ice cream, and suddenly Josh sees these guys coming in. And I think John Pfeiffer might even be one of those guys. I'm not sure. But a crew of guys comes in, and they all order ice creams, and a ton of ice cream. And then they tell Josh that he has to eat all of it. He has to eat all of the ice cream that they ordered. And
then
Josh tries. Yeah, he tries until he has to run away and barf. And that ends up being a really important plot moment of the book because after he throws up and Julie is walking around in the parking lot or something with him, helping him sort of turn less pale, they're talking about how terrible Bruce is and how unforgivable it is. And then Bruce comes out and he apologizes and he's all charming. And suddenly Julie, who is kind of oh, this Bruce guy, he is a sensitive soul after all. She's had this inkling that he's not so bad after all. And that's when Bruce, Elizabeth, do you remember the order of things here? Elizabeth sees that Julie and, Elizabeth doesn't want Julie to be interested in Bruce.
Yeah.
So she sees that Julie and Bruce are kind of or that Bruce is sort of flirting with Julie and tries to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I remember at this point, Elizabeth was the entire time Elizabeth talks to Jessica about what an asshole Bruce is and how Julie shouldn't actually be giving him any sort of time of day. And Julie at this point can't wait for, Elizabeth and Josh to leave so that she could have alone time with Bruce. Because like she says, oh, this is her big chance to make some leeway.
And she gets it. Elizabeth leaves and Josh leaves and Julie gets invited to the Phi Epsilon party by Bruce.
Yeah. Elizabeth reluctantly leaves. I remember her giving her eyes are you sure? But at the same time, everyone's treating Julie like she doesn't know better.
Right.
Just because she's willing to give him the time of day, she must be just crazy.
And Julie, that's such a good point. It's important to note that because Julie's getting pissed about it. She gradually gets more and more angry as people are warning her against Bruce. Don't you think I can judge character on my own? Don't you think I can trust myself? I'm not deluding myself about Bruce. Even if we don't date anymore after this party, at least the party will be something to remember because she's not a very social person. Here's something that I thought was funny. This is Elizabeth and Julie talking about Bruce when Elizabeth first thinks that maybe Julie might be interested in Bruce. Julie says, first of all, which I thought was cute, he's a hunk. But okay,
can we bring
so
back
Elizabeth,
hunk? Can hunk be a Sweet Valley hunk? Can that be like a hashtag?
Yeah, maybe instead of like the part of the podcast where we talk about boys, it can be like hunk talk.
Oh, I love that.
But we'll still have to have the theme song. So, but going on from he's a hunk. This is the kind of Elizabeth's mindset about Bruce, which I thought was well said and kind of funny. Elizabeth wanted to laugh with Julie, but she felt a little tense about the whole situation. Along with Julie's shyness, there was something very naive about her. That was one of her most refreshing and lovable qualities, but it made Elizabeth a little afraid for Julie. Julie was the last person she wanted to see hurt, especially by Bruce Patman, who seemed to be reverting to his old playboy behavior. So many girls had thrown themselves at Bruce's feet, some because of his sexy, handsome look, some because of his family's prestige in Sweet Valley, still others because they wanted to be seen riding with him in his black Porsche. And Bruce seemed willing and able to accommodate all of them, one after the other. When he got tired of one, usually after a week or so of dating, he just moved on to the next. After Jessica had been dumped by him, she remarked that the rest of the girls ought to take numbers, like a bakery or a delicatessen. Bruce's favorite word seemed to be next.
I actually highlighted that sentence. Bruce's favorite word seemed to be next.
Yeah.
I mean, I did.
Says a lot.
Yeah. Bruce, like, I felt like I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I wanted it to be like, well, maybe he's just like, I was thinking like Julie Porter, where it was like,
well, and all that stuff, strictly speaking, is true. You know, that Bruce has really gone through something, and maybe he is just overcompensating. All of that stuff that Jessica is talking about and that Elizabeth is thinking about, that is all old Bruce stuff. Jessica and Bruce's relationship is from book 3 of this series. You know, we're on 47 now, so even by Sweet Valley standards, that was a long time ago. So he's been through a lot since then.
That was like 6 months ago in Sweet Valley timeline.
I was thinking about it, like, if each book lasted, well, there are different ways to think about it, but one way that I think is kind of fun to think about the passage of time is the way that it would have seemed to readers of the books at the time, because these books came out once a month. So the distance from that first book, or like the third book, to this book is like 5 years.
Wow.
Because this book was published in August of 88, and the series started in 83.
Wow. So, well, yeah. I was thinking about the passage of time because they keep saying that Josh's initiation time would be over soon. And so I was kind of mentally taking note of that. Like, okay, he's got one more week of it. And there's actually like a home stretch for him where he's like, okay, I just have to get through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so it made me think, like, how long has it been since he was stuffed in that locker, and how long has he been pledging before that? I mean, what does it take to get into the Phi Epsilons?
Yeah.
How many? Well, is it a month of torture?
Yeah, it sort of seems like it. It's at least 2 weeks. It seems like it must be. Because they do the ice cream thing.
It seems like it goes from the ice cream thing to the party, like where they have to set up for the party.
Sure, the day before the party. That's a big thing where all of the pledges are cleaning, basically being asked to clean Bruce's house. Bruce's parents are on vacation and the staff is away or something. I don't know, but all the pledges are cleaning, and all of the other frat brothers are just kind of hanging around having a good time. Yeah. And there's a lot of really gross, like toxic masculinity. I mean, this whole book is a primer in toxic masculinity, but there's stuff about like, at the same time that Bruce is making the pledges vacuum, he's also giving them a hard time about being good at vacuuming because they must really
that's
like
something
vacuuming.
that your mom does. Yeah, he even says,
Or
like...
At some point, there's a line about, like, you would make somebody a great wife. It's gross. It's so gross.
I am a wife and I don't vacuum.
Yeah, that's damn straight. Down with the patriarchy.
Take that, Bruce Patman.
But there's, so Josh is complaining about this a little bit to Julie, and Julie makes this great point where, well, basically, this comes out of something else. I'm going to start this whole thought over again.
Okay.
So Josh and Julie, after Bruce invites her to this party, have a moment where, it's revealing about Josh's maybe feelings about Julie and feelings about the whole situation. But Julie also makes a really good point talking to Josh. So real quick, I'm going to read this. So Julie's just told Josh that she was invited to the party by Bruce. She's going to be Bruce's date. And you said yes, just like that? Julie was disappointed by Josh's reaction. She had expected him to be happy. Well, yes. Did I do something wrong? I mean, I know he was a little mean and arrogant yesterday, but he went out of his way to apologize, and he was so sweet. Sweet? Julie, I know it's none of my business, but, well, to tell you the truth, I don't think Bruce is worth the time of day from you. He's more than just arrogant. He has a really bad reputation, Julie. Well, he's your future fraternity brother, Josh. If he's so awful, why are you even bothering to pledge Phi Epsilon? You must see something worthwhile in all those guys if you're dying to be one of them. She's pointing out to Josh, this guy that you are telling me is so terrible is like the king of the fraternity that you are bending over backwards to pledge to, so
it's on you. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost as if she's saying, if you dropped out of the pledge process, I would not go to the party with Bruce. But she doesn't say that.
No, she doesn't say that until the very end, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't think she even realizes it at that point. I think, I don't think either of them realize how important the other is to them until they start hurting each other. I'm talking about Josh and Julie, as far as old friends relationships go. You don't realize it's love until you don't have it anymore to rely on. It's a very, it's kind of like Drive Me Crazy, that awesome 90s movie with Melissa Joan Hart.
One of my favorites.
Me too. Let's talk about that. Let's table that. We can have a whole nother conversation.
Well, I mean, I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about during extra drama. Like, it was possibly, toxic masculinity or like high school parties, but we can just talk about Drive Me Crazy. That sounds like more fun.
I know that movie inside and out.
Amazing. Okay. Well, Gladiators, stay tuned for next week when you're going to listen to Marissa and two Marissas talk about Drive Me Crazy. I think that in order to get into the big centerpiece kind of hazing prank thing of the book, and it's like a center point of the story, we need to sort of touch on Jessica's B plot.
Yes. Let's not forget, Jessica is a ballerina now.
Yeah. So I think you might be right that maybe Sweet Valley Twins has started by now, because I remember in those books, the girls did a lot of ballet, and there's a lot of references to like when they were younger, they used to take ballet classes, but they haven't in a while. But the short version of the story is Jessica is auditioning for a play, and they're casting outside of the usual drama club members because they need someone who knows how to dance, who knows ballet. And so Jessica is trying to become, to dust off 4 years of cobwebs and become the best ballerina possible. And she really wants to kill this audition. And so I'm fast forwarding through all of that to say that Jessica and Lila have this scene in some kind of ballet shop.
Well, they had those in the 80s. They did have those where it's like, you like dance, here's everything that you ever needed for dance. I know because I was also an 80s ballerina.
Well, we know leotards and leg warmers are really popular in the 80s.
Yes, that's true. You didn't have to be a dancer to sport those. Just needed to want to look like Molly Ringwald. So I do, but I don't remember there being those any sort of like fancy dressing rooms. But Lila and Jessica are actually, Lila's judging Jessica's dancer looks because, you know, that has everything to do with casting in a high school play.
Yeah, she needs to look her best.
Yes.
And show off her body. Lila has the greatest line in here, actually. I didn't even mark this, but since I found this page, she says, "You'll either walk away with that part or they'll lock you up for indecent exposure." So I don't know what that says about Mr. Jaworski, the drama club teacher, but I don't think Mr. Jaworski is interested in Jessica. So or anyone like her.
Well, but here is where we meet Danielle Alexander.
Yes, exactly my point. You read my mind here from across the city. You have read my mind. Danielle Alexander. So Danielle Alexander. She's a new character. We never heard of her before.
She's a senior, so we probably won't hear much from her again. But Jessica seems very threatened by her because she is tall and blonde and talented.
She's amazing. Like, they can tell by the dance moves that she does in front of the mirror that she must practice every day and be like, she's going to try out for the Los Angeles Ballet. She's amazing. And she's tall and blonde, as you said. And this is important because there is a rumor going around, just in the periphery of Hot Topics, that Bruce Patman has invited a tall blonde senior to be his date to the Phi Epsilon party. Well, Gladiators, you may recall that Bruce Patman already has a date. It's Julie Porter. But so it's like, did he invite the question is like, did he invite some senior to the party and she turned him down, so Julie was a backup? Or is it just a rumor, it's not even true? Or is there some nefarious double dealing going on?
How dare he to double, like, that philanderer.
Yeah. Well, nobody really knows what's up, but I mean, we spoiled it for you Gladiators already by explaining Danielle Alexander. But the book is pretty clever in the way that it kind of plants her as a character, then says that there's this rumor that he invited some senior. And then we start to get the details, not only the details that Danielle is tall and blonde, but also the book makes a point right off the top with Julie to have her say something about being short. So it's clear, it's very clear that the rumor does not line up with the mere fact that Bruce invited Julie to the dance, or not dance, but you can forgive me for saying dance. It's Sweet Valley High. There's a lot of dances. This party is essentially the dance of book number 47.
Yeah, and Julie is also notoriously redheaded. They say this a lot, that she's one of the few redheads at Sweet Valley High.
Yeah. And the big deal, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, but maybe we all know someone like this, or maybe we are someone like this. Julie is attractive enough, and whatever. It's just that she is like a type that doesn't seem to be Bruce's type. She's quiet. She's reserved. They describe Bruce as going for like flashier types. So that's part of why people are a little bit surprised that Bruce would ask Julie to the party in the first place. And it makes people automatically suspicious that he's up to something, which of course poor Julie hates. It is kind of offensive.
Yeah. But she even says to herself, like at the end of chapter 2, she says, "Be realistic, Julie. It's ridiculous to even think he'd consider going out with you." So, let's think about when we when we talk about Bruce's type, how that affects all of people's own self-esteem. And at the same, I think the healthiest outlook Julie had was, you know what? Maybe he did invite somebody else first that's his type or whatever, but I'm going with him and it's going to be fun. And
yeah,
I was just like, more power to you, girl. Like, this is your date.
Yeah, she's not being dumb about it. Like, really, she's being pretty clear-headed. Like, I know this is kind of out there, so it's not like he's my boyfriend now. I'm just going to go have a good time and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And it makes it all the more tragic. I think we can go there, that
nothing could have prepared her for what happened at the party.
Right. So I guess we should say that nothing could have prepared her, but Josh and Elizabeth do try. Josh and Elizabeth do try to prepare her by telling her about the rumor, but also very generously making it clear that it is just a rumor. They don't know for sure if he really did invite someone else or who that someone else might be. But Elizabeth starts to put the pieces together when she connects, I don't know, Danielle Alexander is tall and blonde. But anyway.
Well, let me talk about that for a second, because I was actually surprised to hear that Elizabeth is the head of the eyes and ears column at the Oracle, which seems more of like a Jessica beat than an Elizabeth beat, if you ask me. Like, Elizabeth should be talking about, like, I don't know, I would even, if she even had the sports beat, I would be more.
Yeah, I think I agree that it is strange that that's what Elizabeth does. It's been a part of her character since the very, very beginning of the book, of the whole series, is that Elizabeth writes for eyes and ears. But of all the things, it does seem strange that that's her dedicated column.
Yeah, maybe she's more like her sister than she thought, or maybe she got that beat because of her sister, but maybe that's a whole nother book that I haven't yet explored to really understand the meaning behind, the motivations behind Elizabeth's choices as a journalist. But beyond that, she gets a tip at the Oracle about what might happen at this party, which she just
that's right,
blatantly ignores. Like, she doesn't even she gets a tip, and it says it has Danielle's name on it and Bruce's name on it, and a couple other Phi Epsilon guys. I think Josh's name is on it. Let me see if I can try and find that. But like, that doesn't ring enough bells for her to actually read the whole tip and actually prepare for what might happen.
I can hear myself being such a shameless Elizabeth apologist right now, but what she tells herself is, this is after Julie has already basically scolded her and Josh for trying to warn her about the date. And so Elizabeth is like, Jessica told me it was none of my business. Julie has told me it's none of my business. Julie can make her own decisions. She's a big girl. I guess what'll be will be, because it's still just a rumor. So it's not.
Yeah, that's true. There is even like a part, even before that, the second time they're warning Julie about Bruce Patman, where Elizabeth and Josh decide to go over to her house and tell her face to face that there's a rumor that this Danielle person might actually be Bruce's date to the party. And they make Julie cry just by telling her, like, hey, we heard a rumor. So I can see what you're saying here. I'll accept this apology for Elizabeth, because, like, why would you want to make Julie cry again?
Well, it's definitely the wrong decision, but she makes it for, like, respectable reasons. That's as much as I can say about it. Okay. What she's trying to do is something that Elizabeth does so rarely, and really always at the worst possible times. She is trying to keep her nose out of other people's business.
Yeah.
So again, I will repeat myself. Elizabeth doesn't do a good job of that most of the time, but when she chooses not to meddle, usually it's at times that she should be meddling. So
yeah.
Really, like, if Elizabeth could step outside of her own life and read these books, I feel like the lesson that she would take away is that she should always be meddling. Like, she is the problem solver, connective tissue of of so many of these stories.
Well,
accidentally half the time.
Most of the people that she meddles with are kind of thankful for it.
Yeah, exactly.
No one ever scolds Elizabeth for her meddling. Only Jessica.
Yeah. She doesn't meddle enough in her own life, weirdly enough. Like, when it comes to, like, Elizabeth stories and it's something about a romance or something about a friend or something about Jessica, she's more likely to keep her feelings to herself rather than to voice them, which is, I'm realizing as I say it out loud, just one more reason that I relate to Elizabeth. Well, let's talk about the party. This is getting too real.
I mean, just one last thing, though. Like, when Elizabeth meddles with Julie's perception of Bruce, I had to label her as the troublemaker in the book during those times. Just wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great question. A question we should revisit at the end of this episode. Who is the troublemaker?
But
so
Phi Epsilon party.
They get to the party. And Julie has said that Bruce has said he can't pick her up because he needs to set things up. It's believable. So they get there, and who should answer the door but Josh? And he's wearing a long blonde wig. All of the pledges are dressed. They're not all dressed in feminine clothing. They are all dressed in silly outfits.
Some have fruit on their head. One is a monkey or something.
Something like that, yeah. So,
but
yeah,
it's only insulting
it does
when
seem
Josh
like this...
is in. It's only upsetting because Josh has taken so much of the brunt of the tasing.
Yeah. And so one thing about this party is that they have moved the furniture aside so that there's a big open dance floor. So I guess it is a dance in a way. And that makes it so there's this like dark alcove where couples can like sit. There's like a makeout corner basically. Right?
Yeah. There's like nooks. They call it an alcove.
An alcove, a dark alcove, yes. So there's a dark alcove, and that's clocked. And Julie goes up to Bruce and kind of flirts with him a little bit, and Bruce gives her a tour. And so I just wanted to read a little bit of that. This is what Bruce is serving Julie at the beginning of the party. Bruce led her through a short hallway and into a large room full of couples. Some were gathered around a pool table, others were playing pinball, and still others were concentrating on video games on a 26-inch display terminal. Fantastic, Julie said. Yeah, Bruce said smugly. Nobody ever gets bored around here. Julie didn't know what to say next. Do you want to play some pinball? Bruce chuckled. No, I have other things in mind for tonight. He looked at Julie with a lopsided smile. But hey, the tour has just begun. I could continue.
I actually really like this scene where he's taking her around the house. Can I read my favorite part of the scene?
Mm-hmm. Please do.
So, Julie held her breath as Bruce opened the door to his bedroom. There was a gorgeous mahogany 4-poster bed. One wall was covered with photos of Bruce in tennis and track team gear. A glassed-in case against another wall held several trophies and plaques, and a huge glossy poster of a Porsche just like Bruce's covered the third wall. So Bruce never forgot who his first love was, himself.
Bruce. Well, also, after that paragraph, Bruce finally speaks, and what he says is, "This is where I spend a lot of my time." Which is one of those things that poor Julie doesn't quite know if he's being suggestive or not. Because like any teenager spends a lot of their time in their room. And he keeps her on her toes by talking about how the bed is an antique that his mom bought. So that's not very sexy. I mean, depending on what you're into. I guess,
you know, sexy, now that I'm in my mid-30s, antiques do really get me going.
An antique 4-poster bed? Yes,
Shut up. These are so hard to find.
You let your mom pick out your furniture? That's so open-minded of you. I don't know. That might be a red flag. I guess it depends on how much of the furniture she chose. And I love how awkward Julie is throughout all this. Like, she's really trying to... The book shows her trying to play it cool and struggling a little bit. But Bruce is really flirting. But he takes her back downstairs so she can and she does kind of breathe easy because she's on her toes. She's prepared for something maybe a little bit more like untoward to happen. And she might not hate that, but it would be new for her. We learn very soon after this that Julie has never kissed a boy. Like, it's all new to her.
I will say that a reoccurring theme that I picked up in this book are the how each character is really trying to be something other than what they've been labeled as in the past, which is why I thought Bruce Patman was actually a good guy. Because, like, you know, we've got Elizabeth who's like, I'm going to be a musician, but no one ever really thought of her as a musician before. And Josh is, I'm going to be a Phi Epsilon, but it's not in me to be as cruel as Bruce is, who's the pinnacle Phi Epsilon. And then we've got Julie. Oh, we've got Jessica, who's a dancer now. Who decides that, you know, I have never really been good at dancing, but I'm going to do it now. And
also, the whole arc of Jessica's story continues with that, though, because what she finds out is that what they really want is for someone to be able to act like a bad dancer, like someone who can dance well enough to also make it like be able to control her body and be like a physical comedian, because it's not a romantic lead, it's a comedic lead. And Jessica is like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be the glamorous, you know, show off. But eventually she does decide that she'll go ahead and take the role, and she becomes this, you know, she has this great star turn as a comedian in the school play. Yeah. You can't take it with you? Is that what it is?
Is it? They never really say what it is.
They say what it is, but I can't remember.
Well, if I were Jessica, I'd be kind of butthurt at the friend who was like, hey, you should try out for this role, because, you know, they don't say much about that friend, though I'm sure there'll be another book about, you know, her and the Mr. Jakowski or whatever.
Mr. Jaworski,
Jaworski.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure.
This is not the first nor the last. Mr. Jaworski.
Well, I'm actually very excited about that.
Yeah, frankly, me too. The whole series could be Mr. Jaworski's class, and that would be really probably even more exciting to me than what the book actually is.
There's no drama quite like the drama club. So
it is. You can't take it with you, by the way.
Oh, okay. Okay. I guess I wasn't paying that close of attention, but I knew.
Well,
I knew.
Did you just read the book a few hours ago? Because
I finished the book just a few hours ago. I started it when you told me you wanted me to read this book like months ago.
Oh, okay. Well, that was like a chapter 1 detail, so that might be why you didn't remember. So we're at the party, okay? We're at the party. And eventually, like, Bruce keeps on kind of disappearing, and Elizabeth keeps on seeing Bruce, talking with, and even, like, caressing and, like, kissing Danielle. So Elizabeth was right. Danielle is the other date. But we don't know what he's up to. He's doing a whole, like, Mrs. Doubtfire, except way less funny and way less complicated. Like, he just is, like, cavorts with Danielle when Julie can't see, and then goes and spends some more time with Julie. But
Danielle seems to be in on it too. Like, they're like laughing and giggling to themselves, and she seems to know that there's something up.
But Bruce takes Julie to the dark alcove, and they like settle in like makeout corner, and she's even a little bit like awkward, like, oh, I'm kind of tilted, and he like pulls her closer, and it's like, Then they are going to talk. He's like, tell me about yourself, you know? And so Julie talks for a long time, and then Bruce goes to change the CD. He's like, I'll be right back, you know? And he puts on, what is it? The Summer Wind Consort.
Nothing says a hoppin' high school party.
Yeah. It's like a jazz classical fusion band. And Elizabeth notices the music, and she's like, I wonder who at this party would be classy enough to put on this music. But, so Julie is waiting, and it's so dark. It's like very, very dark back in this alcove. And so I will read the pivotal moment here. When she opened her eyes, she could see him approaching her in the darkness. In one swift, passionate movement, he swooped down onto the couch and enfolded her in his arms. And as he touched his lips to hers, whatever lingering doubts she had about him melted away. Julie wanted to hold on to the moment forever, memorize every tiny sensation, every slow, tender movement in their kiss. And then, without warning, she felt a stinging sensation in her eyes. Some fool had turned the lights on, spoiling the special moment. Julie pulled away, suddenly self-conscious again. She opened her eyes, shielding them with her hand. What she saw made her body rigid with shock. She was staring right at Josh. Together, they sprang off the couch. "Josh!" she managed to cry out. "What are you doing here?" "Julie," he answered. This is..." Julie was completely flabbergasted, and she couldn't stop her next words from babbling out. "You're supposed to be Bruce! Bruce was... What did you do? How dare you?" Josh waved his arms defensively. "I thought you were... Oh, this is unbelievable." Slowly, a wave of titters began to spread. Everyone in the alcove was staring at them. Near the entrance to the main room, a group of people had gathered to see what was going on. Some were laughing out loud, while others covered their mouths to stifle their giggles. Julie was frozen with shock and embarrassment. Looking around, she realized the whole thing had been a horrible, cruel setup.
Oh, Julie. She's been Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. And it's like, except for one that she thinks that she's been Revenge of the Nerds is what she thinks, but Josh has also been duped, but she doesn't know that. She thinks like Josh would do anything she's seen Josh do terrible things for this pledge. He must have known all along. He was in on this cruel prank, and he knew that he knew how I felt about Bruce, and he knew. But Josh actually didn't know, and we find out in the next chapter that Josh had been told that there was some kind of like best kisser competition or something.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not sure, but I think that's how Danielle got pulled in. I think that Bruce might have recruited her to be the person that all of the pledges kissed. I don't know. This is why I'm filling in the blanks.
It was a little bit hard to understand what the pledges thought the plan was, or what Josh thought was going on. But he definitely didn't think he was going to be kissing Julie.
His old high school, or his old, best friend from childhood. Yeah, it surprised him as much
and I
as
guess
it did her.
Even more importantly, like who wasn't in on it. He didn't think he was going to be kissing anyone who wasn't in on it.
Yeah.
And he didn't think that he certainly didn't think that Julie was going to think that he was Bruce. Nobody, it's really gross, actually. I mean, I was so caught up in how embarrassing it would be that I haven't stopped to think about how fucked up it is.
Well, I mean, even after that, like, yes, super fucked up, but then he continues to let them do fucked up stuff to him that includes kissing girls who don't want to be kissed.
Yeah, that was really... I have read this book before, and it wasn't all that long ago. I read this book... I was looking at Goodreads. I logged it. I read it in March of 2016, but I had forgotten that later on in this same week, because somehow this frat party is not the end of the... It's not the pinnacle of the hazing period. It's just like the midpoint. Julie sees... It's like the boys are dancing around like performing monkeys or something, and like jumping up and kissing all the girls that are watching. And Julie somehow is like walking by and gets kissed by Josh, who doesn't realize that he's kissing her. It's very hard to picture how. And then he feels even more terrible because he's let way too much time. I mean, he should have rushed out of the party and cleared things up right away. But instead, it's like the party's on a Friday. We turn the page from that passage I just read practically, and it's Monday. Mm-hmm. You know, like. The next time we hear from Julie, I guess I should say, it's not literally the next page, but the next time we hear from Julie, it's Monday, and Josh hasn't cleared up anything, and she's pretending like she's cool with it, and she's forgotten all about it, but really, I'm sure she's crying about it all weekend.
Yeah, and he even thought about it as she left. He saw Elizabeth and Julie leave the party, and he saw that Elizabeth was taking her boyfriend's car to go drive Julie home. And he's like, maybe I shouldn't ruin my friendship with my friend. Oh, but she's not going to talk to me again anyway. So I should probably just stay here and continue to take crap from Bruce Patman. His reasoning being, I've already gotten this far. It can't get much worse than this.
Yeah, there's even that big scene where Winston is talking to Josh. This is at the party afterwards, because Winston is in Phi Epsilon, and he just hates what just happened. Like, he's really upset about what just happened, and he tells Josh that maybe it's not worth it. You know, like the fraternity used to be cool, but now I don't know. Bruce seems like he has a lot of clout, and everybody's trying to please him, and this isn't really fun anymore. So I don't know if it's really worth it to you.
Josh seems to have this hang up with his older brother Phil, because like, if Phil liked it, then I must not be looking at it the right way. You know,
it's kind of like he thinks that if he can get into the fraternity, he can fix it and make it what it used to be.
I appreciate Josh for being an idealist in that way.
Yeah, I do. But it is pretty messed up. But Julie continues to be angry, but Josh is finally able to talk to Elizabeth about it, and Elizabeth tries to intervene on his behalf. But Julie's not.
They talk about it a lot, and I guess, he's a 17-year-old boy still trying to understand his own emotions. And he actually talks about that whenever he thinks about Julie. He can tell that his feelings for her have changed, but he's not sure how. Was it the kiss that did it? Because it was a really good description of the kiss. Like, did Bruce actually do him a favor? I don't know.
But part of him is also worried that the damage is already done with Julie, and like, he might as well he's always doing this back and forth. Like, I get like the idea of the like sweat equity. Like, he's put in so much work already to this thing. It's that sunk cost fallacy, right? It's like, I've already gone through so much humiliation. I can't give up now, because then it will all have been for nothing.
Yeah.
But that's never been less true than in this case.
Well, I mean, at this point, Julie has the best point, that you're willing to go through all of this, and you can see that they're pulling me in to your bullshit, and yet you're still concerned about making it into this bullshit brotherhood. Like,
right. So obviously you care more about the fraternity than me. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the last big thing that happens is pretty great. And I think that this book would make just a really great romantic comedy. like a high school romantic comedy.
Agreed.
Just the whole thing,
it just screams kissing booth.
Yeah. But what's happening is, at this point in time, Josh is like trying to go incognito whenever he's anywhere near his frat brothers, so they don't pull him into whatever bullshit they've got going on. Everybody's in the cafeteria, and it becomes clear that what the pledges are being asked to do is to pretend like they're waiters, and to go around and ask people if they want to select one of these drink options, or like clear people's plates, and just kind of generally make an ass of themselves in this sort of benign but goony way. And because Josh really, he knows that Julie's there, he just doesn't want to be seen doing more dumb stuff for the frat in front of Julie. He tries to hide, but of course that gets him in more trouble, because then Bruce calls him out, and Bruce really has it in for Josh for some reason. Maybe it's because of what John Pfeiffer said, that Bruce sees the nice version of himself in Josh.
Yeah.
But what happens is that Bruce tells Josh that what he has to do,
he sees that, like, because he was hanging out with Elizabeth. Josh was trying to reason with Elizabeth about, like, hey, what did Julie say? He's trying to use Elizabeth as that conduit of, like, can you be the bridge to me and my old friend again? But you can't let the other brothers in Phi Epsilon know that I'm talking to you right now, because they're going to make me do what these other kids are doing, and I just want to talk to you. Bruce sees him, finds out, and he's like, oh, well, since you want to go and talk to ladies, I'm going to just happen to look around the cafeteria and find a lady who's not talking to anyone, and have you be cruel to her. Oh, look, here's Julie Porter. So,
oh, right. And Josh refuses. And Bruce basically says, if you don't do this, if you don't do what I say, you're out. And I'm not going to forget that you spoke back to me or whatever.
Yeah.
And
he makes
so
him
Josh
buy $3 worth of Jell-O.
yeah. So he's supposed to buy all the different kinds of Jell-O. And
I don't know what I don't know what Bruce's
put
big
it all
plan
in a
is,
big bowl.
Bruce is hard to read.
Yeah, he's supposed to go serve it to Julie, in a big pile. So Josh goes to get the Jell-O. He showed her the 6 empty bowls. Sorry, he's showing the cashier the 6 empty bowls of Jell-O, which are all. I gotta just read it. He took 6 bowls of all the different flavored Jell-O, cherry, lime, orange, lemon, and 2 with mixed fruit in them. He dumped all the bowls onto the plate, making a huge mountain of gelatin. Hey, the cashier called out. What do you think you're doing? Don't worry, Josh said with a reassuring smile. I'm paying for it all. He showed her the 6 empty bowls, gave her $3, and picked up the plate. Just love that Jell-O, he added cheerily. The heaping, multicolored mass jiggled crazily as Josh stepped back into the eating area, and a roar of laughter erupted from the Phi Epsilon table. Then, curious about the sudden noise, other people in the cafeteria turned to look at Josh. Before long, just about everyone there was staring at him. Jessica, Lila, Elizabeth, and Julie. When Josh's eyes darted over to Julie's corner, she immediately looked down, but not soon enough for Josh to miss the hurt and confusion in her eyes. Josh walked slowly toward her with the plate. The Jell-O moved as if it were alive. Whoops and cheers rang out from the fraternity table. What a guy, Bruce yelled out, red in the face with laughter. She'll love you for this, Bowen. But when Josh was halfway there, he stopped. Then, without warning, he took a sharp right and picked up his pace, heading right for the fraternity table. With a mushy-sounding splat, Josh dumped the entire plate of Jell-O right into Bruce Patman's lap. Bruce shot up in his seat in shock, sending Jell-O flying in all directions. Ah, my new pants! So, Bruce gets a lap full of Jell-O. Not quite the comeuppance he deserves, but it's a start.
He did deserve more. Yeah, he did make Josh do 55 push-ups after school. He did deserve more than a lap full of Jell-O in what I imagine were pleated khakis.
We call them chinos on Sweet Valley High.
But he did definitely deserve more than that. But was he intending for Josh to just deliver a whole bunch of Jell-O to Julie, or was he going to dump it on Julie the way he dumped it on?
I don't think he was supposed to dump it on Julie. I think he was supposed to just give it to Julie, and then everybody would be looking at Julie and laughing, and I don't know.
Julie that just sounds like free Jell-O.
It's really lame. It's really lame.
Bruce is the worst at being mean. This is the meanest.
Yeah. Well, maybe Bruce thinks Jell-O is déclassé, poor people food.
Commoner's dessert.
I don't know, man. But I do know that after this, Julie and Josh live happily ever after, and Danielle,
they have some real talk.
Bruce
he pulls
too.
her aside. He pulls her aside, and he's like, they have real talk about themselves as people and as people in a relationship with each other. So that was
yeah. And they realized that they had both kind of been pining for each other, and that was part of why this whole situation hurt so much. And they clear the air, and now they can be together, and the music swells, and they pump their fists in the air, something like that.
And actually, Josh does fist pump at Jessica's play, at which Julie is his date. He does actually raise his fist in the air.
Yeah. Jessica kills it in the play. Everybody thinks she's great. And, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the whole story.
Yeah. And I actually highlighted the last highlighted the last scene because of the way they shine a spotlight on Mr. Jaworski, and everyone's going to Casey's, which is the ice cream place in the very beginning where Josh first threw up from too much ice cream, and Mr. Jaworski politely declines, even though there is no high greater than going to the same restaurant after your high school play. And everybody's there ordering stuff and being, outside of character. But Mr. Jaworski declines and says, I made the mistake of ordering a diet breaker the last time I was there, and I haven't had the courage to go back since. I know what you mean, Josh said, as Elizabeth and Julie broke into laughter. And I just really love that everything comes to a nice little circle, like a nice close. It's all comes back to
Gladiators. The diet breaker is the thing that Josh was eating when he got too sick and couldn't go on. Do you think they might like to know what the diet breaker is? Because I do have that marked.
Yeah, actually. And
in case we want to create a diet breaker at home.
You know what? That's not a bad idea.
Okay. All right. The
Josh
next dessert was a huge...
eat several of these, I think. He actually had...
Well, he had to eat a bunch of different things that were all described, like a hot fudge sundae and something called a Casey's concoction.
Which I think is a lot like a...
the Casey's concoction is described, too, as being... It's got like a banana split, kind of.
Gotcha. Sorry. I won't interrupt anymore. Please tell us more about the diet breaker.
A huge glass filled with pistachio ice cream that had been mixed with several kinds of candy and nuts. 4 chocolate chip cookies stuck out of the sides, and topping the whole thing were crushed pineapple, butterscotch sauce, and an inch or 2 of whipped cream. Casey called this one his diet breaker.
That actually sounds disgusting.
It's a lot of flavors happening. I'd be willing to try it, I guess. But I wouldn't want to eat 4 chocolate chip cookies off of my ice cream dessert, but whatever.
I would rather just have 4 chocolate chip cookies, period, instead of with pineapple and caramel and all of the things. It's a bit much, even.
I suppose you could say that it is.
It's a beautiful boys. I'm in danger of losing my head.
We've talked a lot about boys in the course of this book because this is a very boy-heavy book. There's not a ton of, talking about how sexy the boys are, because mostly they're being shits in this book. One boy that I was straining to remember was Ronnie Edwards. He gets mentioned a lot in this book, and I think it's because they needed someone that they could taint by having him be kind of like Bruce's flunky. And we can't have Rick Andover again. He doesn't really seem like the fraternity type anyway. And we don't want to think too ill of poor Winston, Tom McKay, John Pfeiffer. So they bring back Ronnie Edwards, who I was really struggling to think, who is he? Have we heard of him? And it's all the way back in book 2. Enid is dating Ronnie Edwards, and he's the guy who gets really upset when he finds out about her past with George Warren, and he is a dick, but in a weird way. He's he doesn't want her to be a once fast girl because she's not being fast with him, and he has some kind of mommy issues too, as I recall from that book. But anyway, Ronnie Edwards, not a dreamboat,
but just as arrogant as Bruce.
Yes,
that's the only description we have of Ronnie. I recollect the name Winston Egbert. I can't recall Winston's role in earlier Sweet Valley.
Winston is a very regular player. He's the class clown. He's tall and gangly. He's got glasses. He's a good time guy.
Well, and he is also a Phi Epsilon brother, and you'd think that he would be better at creating the goofy things that the boys had to do, but being a class clown and whatever. I think that Winston was in the Sweet Valley TV show, and he was portrayed as more nerdy,
Surely.
I guess. As like,
oh no, he's definitely a
name.
nerd. I mean, this book in isolation, Winston doesn't come off as a nerd, but he. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to just classify him as a nerd because he's popular in a way, but he's studious. He's a goofball, but he's like nerdy looking.
Okay. If you don't give me the description within the book, and I don't have the other books to like refer back to, the only ones that do stand out are the ones that Francine takes a lot of time to explain to you just how good looking they are. And definitely Bruce is always stands out with his dark hair and his green eyes. And not to mention that he's filthy rich. We just come back to like adding to his attractiveness is that he lives in a mansion and he drives a Porsche. I don't know if I don't even remember them describing Josh.
Well, they describe him as having a similar height and build to Bruce, which is an important little detail because it makes it more believable that Julie would see him walking toward her in the dark and think he was Bruce.
Oh, and that would make sense as to why Bruce is sort of projecting.
Seeing him, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, we didn't actually talk about the cover of the.
Yeah, it's the perfect time to talk about the cover,
where you can actually see all three of these characters.
A little short girl with red hair looking up at a cocky-looking fellow, and then another fellow standing behind her looking angrily at that same cocky fellow. Gladiators, maybe we should move the cover descriptions to the end of the episode so that we already have the context of the characters and their relationship by the time
I don't know. It's my fault for just skipping over that part because I feel like it gives, I mean, especially when I was a kid looking through all of these books, and I would judge the book by its cover. Like, do I want to understand this relationship between this redhead gazing longingly up at Bruce Patman and this angry fellow also staring at Bruce Patman with a cocky, his eyebrow up and a little sideways smile there.
I mean, of these two guys, I think the one in the back in this gorgeous teal V-neck sweater over a dark, like hunter green button-up is much more attractive looking than this guy in the front. So clearly that's supposed to be Josh. He looks a lot like Chris O'Donnell, I think.
He does.
Gladiators, if that helps you picture him. But the thing that is most notable about this cover is that what it says underneath the picture is, has Julie Porter fallen for the wrong guy? And I want to say, like, has James Matthews drawn the wrong guy? Because this guy is not Bruce Patman. We know what Bruce Patman looks like from other book covers, and this is not his face.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a Hardy Boy.
He looks like a Hardy Boy. Bruce Patman looks like a Ken doll. He looks like a Ken doll from like one of those surfer beach Ken. That's Bruce Patman,
but with dark hair. But like it's like just a.
I'll put a comparison on my Instagram. Everybody at Sweet Valley Diaries on Instagram. But this is not Bruce Patman. This is. I mean, maybe this is what grief has done to Bruce Patman. But he looks.
He's physically changed due to his grief.
He's got amazing eyebrows, though. This guy has real evil guy eyebrows.
He's wearing that smug look like he created it. I will say.
We talk a lot. We complain a lot on this podcast about how the cover models look like they're old adults, but these kids at least resemble teenagers, especially Julie, who looks like a tiny baby next to these guys. She looks like a little kid. Like, she looks maybe like 12 as opposed to looking 16.
Yeah. She's giving me some major Molly Ringwald vibes with that hairdo.
Yeah, there we go. So we got Chris, we got Molly, and then some other guy who's not Bruce Patman.
I'm sure we've got Chris, Molly, and a random Hardy Boy.
Exactly. Marissa, do you feel, having now read this second Porter Girls book, that you are a Jessica or an Elizabeth? Or someone else?
I still feel very Jessica. I wouldn't have had the same struggle with a comedic character as she did, as long as I was the center of attention. And I feel like Elizabeth helped remind her of that fact, that like, hey, even though you're not a good dancer and you're not a romantic lead and you're not a good reader, apparently, you're
right, because she has every opportunity to read the play and know, if she had read it, she would know for herself what the part was like, but she doesn't. She's too busy practicing getting to be a good dancer. But
true to Jessica form, and as called by her sister Elizabeth in the first chapter, wouldn't it be so Jessica if she didn't read the play and still got the part? And that is exactly what happened.
It is.
So I enjoy Jessica for being Jessica, and I still sort of align in that space as that, randomly seeing some other girl in a dressing room and thinking that she's some kind of competition just because she is good at something and is also beautiful. I can relate to that sudden sense of, hey, this is a competition now, and hey, I have to shine my best, even in the dressing room. So I think that high school Marissa is very much a Jessica, and I still feel aligned with her.
I think that's nice. See, that it's like a personality test, you like, things about your life might change, but your core assessment remains the same throughout your life. Well, this episode is running a little bit long, but we did promise the gladiators that we were going to revisit the question of who is the troublemaker? Who's the troublemaker?
Really, I mean, ultimately it's Bruce, because of the way that he just relentlessly hazes his soon-to-be brothers, and feels like he has the right to. But at the same time, we could argue that there are, Elizabeth with her meddling can be made a troublemaker, and Josh with his unwillingness to stand up for himself and create chaos.
And really every boy, I mean, if we had wanted to and hadn't been so excited about talking into the plot, we probably could have spent a lot of time in this episode just talking about like how disgusting it was to watch these boys put themselves through this dumb macho bullshit for no reason, and at other people's expense and at each other's expense. It was ridiculous, and it just makes you shake your head like, why? Like, why?
Yeah.
Why does this happen? Why do fraternities have hazing? Why do you want to be a part of a club that makes you torture yourself to join?
Well, Josh asks those questions all throughout the book. And his only answer is, well, Phil liked it. My big brother liked it. And it can't be all that bad then, because Phil is a god to me. So,
and like, don't get me wrong, I can think of answers to those questions, but the answers are not satisfying to me. But I'm the kind of person, like, I don't even like pranks. Like, I don't like pranks because I don't think that it is funny to be mean to someone that you care about. And if you don't care about the person, then it is literally just being mean. So, so often pranks are something that are like played on loved ones because it's like funny to embarrass them, and I don't get that. But I realize that's very poor humored of me, but what can I say? Well, Marissa, let's talk more next week. Probably not about this book. Let's be real, we're gonna talk about Drive Me Crazy.
I can't wait.
Okay. Thank you so much for being my guest again on Sweet Valley Diaries. It was wonderful to have you.
Truly my pleasure.
And I don't know when the Porters come up again, but we might have to broaden your scope. We'll see. I'll have to look at the upcoming books so that I can have you back before too long. There are no other Porter siblings, so
I'll take another Amy Sutton book if we.
Oh my gosh,
we've lost touch with Amy Sutton. We did see her a little bit in this book,
Oof. We are going to get a lot of Amy Sutton next week, which actually reminds me, would you mind teasing the gladiators for the next book number 48, by reading the last sentence in the book?
Yes.
The bold italicized sentence?
Let me get over there.
Well, while Marissa is finding that, allow me to thank you so much for listening to the podcast. You can follow Sweet Valley Diaries on Instagram at Sweet Valley Diaries, or on Twitter at Sweet Valley, where I am trying to tweet more often. And that's fun. And it'll be more fun if people participate. Thank you to everyone for the kind words that you have sent me recently about helping you get through quarantine and stuff. This is a podcast I just do for fun. I don't get paid to do it. I haven't yet devised a plan to ask to be paid to do it. And so the payment that I get right now is knowing that people are enjoying listening to it. So tell a friend if you think they'd like it. What do you say, Marissa? Are you ready to tease?
Yes. Find out what the excitement is all about in Sweet Valley High number 48, Slam Book Fever.
Oh my gosh, Slam Book Fever, y'all.
Dude, there's going to be some Mean Girls, action happening. I actually cannot wait to hear all about it.
Awesome.
So does that make me Miss America?
Bye, gladiators. Thanks for having me.